Today we have pleasure to talk with Mr. Devin Townsend before the show on the Transcendence tour. Hello.
Hey.
Whenever I was watching, reading or listening to any interview with you, I had this observation. There is one question that must be asked. Let's just get it over with. No plans for strapping young lad reunion?
Well, I like to think that doesn't have to be asked, but considering it is, yes, the answer is the same as it is the other 1,000 times I've answered it.
Yeah, so let's just move on. Okay, when I first heard the Transcendence, I had this feeling this record somehow sums up your previous work, all the style you have worked for throughout these years.
Yeah. I mean, in a sense, it changes every year too. I like the idea of allowing it to change. But I've been doing this for so long, dude. Like, I am an old man now. Like, I don't know quite how that happened. Just all of a sudden, at one point when we first started, I was the youngest one. I was like the kid. And now I'm like older than everybody. It's fucking great. So as a result of that, you just have to follow it where it goes and not be too concerned about whether or not it works for everybody. You know what I mean? Like, some people are going to like it, some people are always going to hate it. And as long as I'm happy with it, then that's kind of where I'm at with it at this point.
I found your statement that you didn't want to show the dark, ugly things on the Transcendence because there is enough shit in the world already. Yeah. But there are a few darker moments, especially the middle part of the song Higher, this monumental record. There is almost this brutal slamming riffs that remind me even about the strapping young lad.
Sure. Yeah, that's all part of me. I think the thing with strapping as well is that was a huge part of my personality, until it wasn't, until I just decided to do something else. But that's still in there. And when I say I'm trying to do things that are positive and not add to the ugliness of the world, I'm not trying to be, I'm not on a mission. I'm not trying to, it's not like we're trying to change the world. It's just for my own sake. Every time you open up your news feed, it's just bullshit. And I still think that there's things in my life, at least, that are really nice. So why would I not want to write about that right now? Yeah.
Well, it kind of reminds me of what Carl Jung once said, that people actually achieve enlightenment not by seeking the radiant light creatures, but acknowledging that darkness.
Very much. That's a great point. Carl Jung is a favorite of mine as well. That's really interesting, actually, because you can never avoid the dark is the thing. I think a lot of times there's this sort of sense of, like, when people talk about being positive or whatever, it's like ignoring the fact that all this bullshit exists. But that's absurd. It's childish to think that you can do that. And at the same time, it's like, it's childish to think that those same things aren't within you. Like, I'm not enlightened. I'm not a saint by any stretch of the imagination. Like, holy fuck. So for me to pretend that the darkness doesn't exist in me, and it's a huge part of my person, that's a human trait in a lot of ways, is absurd. But I think making peace with it is ultimately, you get over it in some ways. And I think that's what Transcendence was about, more so than saying darkness doesn't exist and I'm a peaceful person. It's more like, no, darkness exists and I have a brutal mind like the rest of us, but the choices that I make right now are to try and attract things to my life that are more in line with what I want.
Well, so now let's step back from philosophy for a little bit and let's talk about the music. Transcendence is the record when the rest of your band took, I think, larger part in composing and arranging the material than ever before. Yeah. Why did you make that decision right now? Why with Transcendence?
We run out of things to write about. And my whole world has been about me for so many years, and I just kind of got bored of me. There's what else you're going to write about, So I think in a sense, with Transcendence, I was still able to write it the way that I did. Like, I wrote still wrote it, and finished it, and the vision and the trajectory and lyrics. It's still very much like any of the other records, but the guys helped me make it better, right? And why would I not want that? I think part of getting over it is getting over the fact that maybe you feel like you know it all, or like you're better than everybody else in some way, and I'm clearly not. So it's taken years for me to separate me from my work. And I think that in the past, it's like so much of my personality was invested in the music that if anybody gave me any criticism on it or compliments on it even, it would be like a direct, we're talking about you. It's not the music, it's you. And that's just unhealthy at a certain point. Yeah.
This is the topic I want to continue. You are a very productive artist. You released a ton of records, almost one record every year, and that's not including the live stuff, the Retinal Circus by the Threat and Casualties of Cool. Aren't you afraid from the perspective of not essentially the artist that kind of expresses emotions, but from the perspective of creator of music, that such overproductiveness has some danger in it?
Very much. But I think one thing to back up a bit, the reason why I make music is less about the music itself and more about the process. You know, like my life provides me, the experiences of my life provide me raw materials to draw from. So the music has never been of much significance. It's just the exhaust of a process. And I think that process has also led me to a point recently where I recognize that a lot of my uber productivity in the past is rooted in me being afraid of stopping. You know, I stopped drinking, I stopped doing drugs, and then I all of a sudden became addicted to work, you know? And I think now that I've gotten to a point where that's a recognition, I can see that more for what it is. And I mean, ultimately on a business level, yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's challenging for people to sell tons of Devin records, and it's challenging for an audience to give a shit. But I mean, ultimately, my reasons for doing it is sort of separate from that. I mean, I like to be able to make a living. I like to be able to sell things because it keeps the boat afloat. But ultimately, I do it for me. And through that productivity, I was able to learn recently that it's a defense, you know? Like I was trying to hide from myself by constantly being busy. And to be perfectly fair, that hasn't really changed. I mean, I'm on tour now for the next year. I've got this online thing. I did a book. I mean, there's tons of shit coming up. But small steps, I think at least now I'm starting to become aware of the mechanism.
We're a bunch of Canucks. We're the Canadian contingent coming down to fill your anus with love and butter.
As you said, every of your albums somehow reflects the experiences and personal struggles of yours. The honest translation of your experience into music. But since that, are you reflective about your music? Do you like to come back to your older records?
Well, I mean, I don't listen to them. You know, it's like they dissolve over time, for sure, right? But every now and then I'll redo a song because... Why? Well, because I think I'm a perfectionist who's not perfect. So I'm always dissatisfied with everything that I do.
This is exactly what I wanted to ask you next. What are your most and least favorite of your albums from the perspective of perfectionist creator?
I think the least would be Physicist, the self-titled SYL record, and maybe Z2. Not because Z2 is a bad album, but because I didn't want to write at the time, and I had to force that. And I think it turned out well considering that, but it wasn't easy. And I think my favorite records are probably... I think Casualties of Cool was really good. God, see, it's like...
Yeah, I know, it's a kind of surprising question. And
No, it's not even surprising. It's just like, as time goes on, I forget about them. It's like they were all okay at the time. I wouldn't have released them had I not thought they were accurate. But, I mean, shit, I don't why would someone who writes music listen to their own music? I mean, I listen to music all day, but I never listen to my own music. That's for other people. And then when other people write music, that's for me, right? So I don't remember. I like Casualties Are Cool, though. It was good.
Yeah, I was not going to ask you if you listen to your albums, but from the perspective of person who created them, how do you feel about them?
Well, because I don't listen to them, it's hard for me to remember. It's like, I feel like a goldfish, you know what I mean? It's like when I'm working on something, I remember it. But then when it's finished, it's just, you forget about it, right?
I get it.
I have now some questions about your new project, The Moth. That vision of you going inside the opera house, getting on the stage and talking to say to people, ladies and gentlemen, you're gonna listen to a symphony about Prince Wanker and Princess Clitoris. That is a balm for my heart. Could you tell us something about how did you come up with this idea? Don't you think that themes in music would be appropriate in symphonical music?
I mean, I guess I don't care, you know? But it's not because I'm trying to be rude to people. It's just I think that, I mean, you look at what's going on in the world, it's just all power. Everyone's power, right? And it's like power over other people. And there's a sense with that like sex plays into that as well. It's like we're such lizard brain creatures, maybe ultimately a need to like collect as much sex as you can, sex and money, and it all equates to this sort of fear of death, which is also tied into like this, you know, questioning what the existence of God or any of these things, right? It seems to be like that's the fundamental human experience right now, is fear of death, questions about God and sex and power, and so why wouldn't you make a symphony out of it, right? And I like the idea of like, I mean, I've done a lot of records, man, and I think as well, like, you run out of things to write about. Like, when I was a kid, I could really write about love easily because it was fresh, it was new. It's like love or hate or whatever. But dude, I'm like 44. I've put out so many records that now it's like, well, it's like taking drugs. You do a little bit and it works at first, and then after a while you need more and more to kind of get you off. And creatively, it's very similar with me right now, as I feel like I get more and more attention for doing what I do. But in order for me to do the thing that makes it important for other people, which is be connected to it, to be authentically connected to it, I need something I care about. I can't just keep, here's another record about love, here's another record about hate, here's another record about this, that, or the other thing. It's like, I need to be stimulated. So something like that, which is over the top, seems like it's an avenue for creative expression that's interesting. And I mean, you wouldn't care either. Like, if someone said, hey man, you can't do this here, you'd probably be like, oh, that's even better.
But don't you think that humor and grotesque would overshadow that message that you want to...
Message. I think that's what's the most important thing to point out. I'm not trying to make a point. I'm just observational more than anything else. And nothing that I've ever done am I claiming is correct. You know, everything is a hypothesis. It's like, what if it's all beautiful? What if it's all shit? What if it's all nihilism? What if it's all absurd? What if it's a bunch of aliens that like coffee? You know, I mean, what if it's a bunch of farting testicles? Like, it's not of much significance to me, other than my point, if I have one, is that in an industry of decreasing size, that you can still be creatively, emotionally, and artistically completely free and get away with it. And I think that point overshadows any philosophic, because I'm not a philosopher, I'm not a brilliant musician, I'm just a person that's trying to be free in some ways and to be able to make a statement. And like, part of that statement is like, okay, well, what if we did it at an opera house with 100-person orchestra and 100-person choir and penises and vaginas and death and, you know, ruminations on God or lack thereof, and make it super brutal and like really provocative but absurd ultimately, and then forget about it and then move on and do something else. I mean, to me, the point that you make out of that is just like, well, you don't have to play pop music to be creatively free. You don't have to be young and good looking to do music. You can still create, and I think that what it requires is for artists such as ourselves to force that in a way. And in my position, I'm in a position where I am afforded the luxury to do these things. So in a sense, the statement that me making something this absurd, whether or not you or anybody else agrees with the statement, the sheer fact that it's able to exist helps, in my opinion.
So now that I think it's good time to ask when.
Maybe never.
Yeah, but I guess it was interview with the Noisy. You said maybe 1 year, maybe 2, maybe 3, but it is gonna happen.
Yeah.
So what are the requirements that need to be fulfilled for it to happen?
I need to care. And right now I want to go on vacation. I think a lot of it is like what we were talking about in the question earlier. My recognition of why I've worked so much for so long is clear to me now. And a project like The Moth is inhuman amounts of effort to make it work. But I'm at a point now, it's like, well, why would you do it? Other than making a point about creative freedom or however I rationalize it, do you want to do that? And if you don't have to, then why would you? But I'm luckily in a position like with Ocean Machine having a 20-year, you know, we can play the record and this tour goes on forever. I'm luckily in a position right now where I can sort of spend some time thinking about that. And honestly, I've consciously gotten rid of music in my head. Up to this point, I've always had like songs rolling around that were very obsessive for me. But right now there's nothing. There's nothing for The Moth, there's nothing for Casualties, there's nothing for DTP. And man, that's never happened. But I think that with the acknowledgement of my workaholic tendencies becoming a problem, I'm now like, okay, well then don't think about music. And so what does that say about The Moth? Well, that means that if it's meant to happen, I'll know. And currently I don't care. But I have an idea, you know? And so if and when the creative mindset makes sense for me to do that, then I've got it mapped out. But also, I'm also at a point where maybe if The Moth gets sacrificed as a project, that's more of a statement to me personally than anything. It's just like you're willing to let something go just because maybe it's not the best thing for your mental health, right? But that's where I'm at with it right now.
You've mentioned Ocean Machine. Yeah, it's now 20th anniversary of this album. You're going to play a very special show in the Roman ancient theater in Bulgaria. And the next year will be the 20th anniversary of Infinity. Are you planning something for that anniversary?
I don't know. I mean, it's the 20th anniversary of City as well. You know what I mean? So I think it's like, you know, I was flippant with the first answer about strapping, but to be a little clearer about it, what I've recognized is that anything I put into my system, musically, personality-wise, media, whatever I ingest affects me. And I think I've got a very sensitive nature, and as a result of that, I got to be really fucking careful with who I have in my life, what I choose to say, and how I choose to say it. And so my decisions to do any of these things always revolve around whether or not I think it's healthy for me now. And strapping was rooted in the same way that I think I recognize now that workaholism was something that has been causing me problems, With strapping, I realized in hindsight that I was afraid of confrontation and anger and aggression and all these things I didn't understand. So by writing about it, I was able to learn. But I also learned through that whatever you throw out comes back to you. And so I have no desire to have that come back at this point. And it's my own choice, right? And Infinity was a period of time that was also really toxic for me. I decided at that point I was just going to do a ton of drugs, right? And it resulted in a type of delusion that was, I mean, it was fun at the time. I mean, it wasn't, maybe not fun, but it was like interesting. But Ocean Machine's a little different, right? So we'll see which ones end up being revisited 20 years down the line.
I don't know if you agree with me, but I think that metalheads, metal artists playing with symphonies, with orchestra, that type of performing is for metalheads risky, because most of the time they don't do it well, in my opinion. Don't you think that it's a risky, it could be cheesy? You don't have that type of fear if...
I have spent 25 years being cheesy. I've got no fear of being cheesy, buddy. If I can put out things about aliens farting and testicles flying around the thing, I got no fear. And then it's, again, I think that question comes from the point of view, if I may, of being concerned about what other people think, right? And I'm concerned that people who listen to what I do recognize that what I'm doing is what I want to do. Past that, it doesn't matter. And so I think one of the reasons why I'm able to do things creatively free is because I've failed so much, man. I've done so many things that haven't worked. I've been seen as cheesy since I was 19 years old. And that is probably my strongest attribute as an artist, is I don't fear that. And I suggest you do the same.